Thank you, and I hope you can hear me up there as well. I hope the microphone is working. Actually, you don't hear the microphone here at all. That's pretty good, pretty nice. 2 sentences about myself. I joined Fortify in 2008 when it was still an independent company. We are working with applications in order to make sure they are securely developed. From my background, I'm actually a developer, a civil consultant. I've worked in the trenches like a lot of you for a bunch of years. So before joining Fortify, I actually did all that stuff. And some technical things, some initial quotes, and I found them actually, meanwhile, fortunately or unfortunately, I have to travel to a lot of different places, and I found some really, really interesting quotes which made me thinking. I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. Any idea who said that? Nope. IBM, exactly. Thomas Watson, president of IBM, 1943. There is no reason anyone would want a computer in their home. We're not talking about a pocket, right? Not a computer in the pocket. We're just talking about a computer in the home. Any idea? Ken Olsen, founder of Digital Equipment Corporation, better known as DEC. Whoever doesn't know DEC finally ended up in HP. So definitely a big provider of computers. Almost all the many predictions now being made about 1996 hinge on the internet's continuing exponential growth. But I predict the internet will soon go spectacularly supernova and in 1996 catastrophically collapse. Any idea? Sorry? Ericsson? Not exactly, but close. Robert Metcalfe, founder of 3Com. Definitely made enough money with the internet, I'm pretty sure. Other quotes actually are still very, very relevant, right? So now when we face a choice between adding features and resolving security issues, we need to choose security. Any idea who said that and when? Bill Gates, exactly. When? In 2002. So this is 18 years ago. And we are still standing here and talking more or less about exactly the same things, as nothing would have really, really changed, right? That is actually something which, made me think. And reading this trustworthy computing memo is really, really interesting. What we see today actually is a big, big change again in development, and something which probably Bill Gates in 2002 has not seen yet, that we have more applications being developed in an even faster cycle, right? If anybody would have told you that there are companies who want to release 48 times a day in 2010 probably even, we would have all thought, well, pretty crazy, right? Pretty ridiculous cycle. Which is right now, if somebody's coming to you and tell you, well, 48 releases a day every 30 minutes, it's not really completely out of scope. On the other side, and I just had a discussion this morning, again, not the first time I had this discussion with somebody, but people telling me, well, my management tells we don't have time for security in all that, right? Constantly deploying new applications. Time for security, not really. So this is really something we have to rethink. Application security is more important than ever if we look at all these different areas, right? And this is just, honestly, it's a marketing slide from Micro Focus, but you see all the different areas of what security can be all about, and some of the parts we heard. But the important statistic here is 90% of security incidents results from exploits against defects in the design or code of software. What does that mean? Well, we'll come to that, right? But 90% of applications out there have security. 90% of the incidents involve software. That's the part. Some statistics from our side, 79% of web applications have at least one critical or high severity issues. This is our own research. We scan a lot of applications, and this is where we see that from. This is going down 1% from last year. So this is really statistical. We're in a university here. Statistics should be known to a lot of people, hopefully. This is for sure statistically not relevant, this go down. And we could easily see this going up again next year. 89% of mobile applications had at least one critical or high severity issue. We see here, probably because of the slow amount of a test case we have here, as again, not a statistical relevant set of data, but this is a high increase. If we talk about application security, what are we actually talking about, right? What is the thing we are looking about? In order of time, I have reduced this example a bit, but what I would like to show you is a cross-site scripting. And this is something which I show you purposely in the first place in a bad demo way, right? It's something which people who work with security like to demo and think, well, everybody should understand that, right? How bad this thing is. So we have a little demo application here, which is hosted on my machine, so I'm allowed to do, just to show you here, right, I have a little VMware here running. It's hosted here. So I'm doing the thing you should never do in a presentation, do a live demo, right? So bear with me if anything is going wrong. But this is really live. So we have this little application here, right? Okay, we didn't test that part before, like switching, yeah. Okay, so let's try that again. Here's my little VMware, just to be sure that I'm allowed to hack this application, do whatever I want with it, kill it at the end of the day. No, I will not try to kill it. But if I click on this one here, we get to this application, hopefully, at one point in time. Okay, and I can log in here. And what we have in here is a little help feature. And I can say here, help, I need a bike. Right? Nothing, everybody has seen that before, right? Really nothing, nothing interesting. I log in as admin right now, look for help, search help. Right? Nothing surprising. Gary needs some help. So I log out again and log in as Gary again here. Who experienced with support, you're sending in a support request and for 2 weeks you haven't heard anything, right? Everybody heard that from, or had that experience at one point in time. So this is happening to Gary here as well, and he wants to give a little bit more grip to that and put something like this in here, right? Who has seen that already? Well, whoever knows HTML a little bit knows that this is actually a JavaScript tag, right? It's opening an alert box. So let's run that one here. Nothing happens. But we log out, log in as admin again, search help. And guess what? We get a nice little pop-up, right? That is, for everybody who knows security, the perfect proof that this application is vulnerable against cross-site scripting, right? For everybody who's not in security, is that scary? Lukas created a pop-up. Wow, right? That is not scary. So if you want to present something in security to people who do not know application security, right? Make it a little bit more beefy. Show a little bit more. So we actually have, if we go here, well, first of all, JavaScript, obviously, we all know that. Meanwhile, JavaScript is a pretty known language, object-oriented, C-like syntax, extremely powerful, and native in every browser, right? Just try for the fun of it for 10 minutes, 50 minutes, well, however you want to enjoy, however long you want to enjoy that fun. Try to browse the web with JavaScript being switched off. Interesting experience. So running JavaScript on a victim's browser has a ton of potential. We have a second application here, Free Bank Online. If you go to this application, and this application is not on my machine, right? If you look here, there's a company named Spy Dynamics. Spy Dynamics is a company acquired in 2008 by HP and finally ending up in the Fortify portfolio doing dynamic application security testing. So this is our application, but it's somewhere hosted in the US. So yes, I'm allowed to attack it. It's a demo application, but it's not under my control. This is what I want to say, right? I can't manipulate it easily here. So this application actually has a cross-site scripting in it, right? If I click on this link here, you see this is possible to hack, even from Vienna. I can change the context here, right? The content of the application. If I add something like this, right? We've seen that before. Guess what? I get another scary pop-up, right? So we have proven perfectly that this application is vulnerable against cross-site scripting. Interestingly, it's vulnerable against cross-site scripting on the login page. Okay, and we have our second application, right? Our very own, which is hosted on my machine here, my application, the attacker's application. So imagine we're going to send out an email. Dear user, we are testing a new login procedure for our banking portal. Please click here, Free Bank Online, to test and provide us feedback. Who has seen such an application, such an email at one point in time? Okay, I'm surprised that I don't see all hands because, well, I got lately, end of last year sometime, I got a bunch of these emails from Cisco actually, saying that my WebEx account would be deleted if I don't do immediately something. The funny bit was I did not even have a WebEx account, so it didn't really work, but that is something. The big difference here is, and if you look at this link here, and if I go to the next page, that is actually the link. The big difference here is normally what you would see in such an email, that this is not going to Free Bank Online, but to Fee Bank Online or Free Bank Online without an E at the some goofy domain, something different, right? In this case, we are really going to the Free Bank Online domain because we have a cross-site scripting. So even the little bit more security-aware user, this is the first thing I trained my wife. Look at these parts here. Well, the second thing I trained her is never click on a link in an email, just go to the web page directly. Much more secure, but if you click on, if you compare this one here, and this is the correct domain, you can be relatively sure that this is the correct application, right? Okay, so if we click on this one, what do we get? Oops, wrong one. If we get a request for a username. Well, that was announced in the email, right? There is a new login procedure. So we put in user here, we put in password. Well, and this for demo purposes here right now, I just put that back in a pop-up, right? In order to show you the username and password. And this is exactly what you see here, right? We ask for the username, we ask for the password, and then we give it back in a pop-up. Okay, let's play a little bit around. And in the first talk, we had the question of to Philippe, are you a hacker? And he said perfectly, well, I'm not really into fiddling around with all these different areas. It took me half a day to fiddle around with all these little quotes and how to set them correctly. Because I'm not a hacker as well, I'm a developer, right? But what I did here is actually in the second one, I said, okay, username, we ask for the username, we ask for the password, and then we use document write, and whoever knows HTML and whoever knows JavaScript and the DOM model knows that with this one I can write back into the HTML page. And what we do here right now, we actually use an image tag, and the benefit of an image tag is it's loaded immediately, right? No user interaction is necessary. So we insert an image tag. And we load something, which again is pretty common in the web, from another application. In this case, from the application which we own, right? Which is my attacking application. So we load this little image, and then we actually show the original behavior of the application, invalid login username. So if we do so, user, password, and we suddenly see here a picture. And this picture has nothing to do with the original application, right? With the free Bank Online application. In fact, it's a picture from our login, right? So we merged a picture into this application. We changed the content of the application just with this cross-site scripting. Just by somebody clicking on this email link, we changed the content of the application. Well, if we can read data from a different application, we probably can send data to a different application as well, right? And this is exactly what we do here. What we see right now here is we have our username, we have our password, we use our document write, our image tag, and then we say here, again, to our own application, list my items do, we call a different page. Username, we send the username, password, we send the password. And then finally, we show the original behavior of the application of showing the invalid login username. So if we click on that one, and the only difficulty we really have right now is to find a password to make sure that this is not set up by me up front. Any password? sec4dev. Well, that's hard to guess. sec4dev. And the other big problem we have here is a little bit of real estate, right? You see here the log file, which is set, and let's hope this is going to work right now. This is where sometimes it breaks. But have a look here at this last, unfortunately, a little bit blurry line. And we see exactly here, right, our username has been sent to this other application. So we own the login data right now from one of the users of Free Bank Online. What the user is seeing is this strange little icon. Everybody has seen that already, right? Nobody really takes care. There's something not properly loaded. Who cares? But we see the original behavior, invalid login user. So what we say as a normal user probably, well, they have to rework their new login procedure, right? It's not properly working. Let's send them an email back and say, guys, you need to rework that. It's not working properly, but I still can log in with the old way. So as a user, I wouldn't even necessarily recognize that in this second, my credentials have been stolen. And this is just a standard possibility of what could happen if you're vulnerable against cross-site scripting in your application, right? This is what can go wrong. There are obviously many other possibilities. These are easy options. I'm not, right? We have a penetration tester here. He can do, I promise you, he can do completely different stuff. These are the easy options. Number of ways to launch, stored cross-site scripting. This is the thing we have seen in the first place, right? The first cross-site scripting I demoed you was a stored cross-site scripting. We have seen a reflected cross-site scripting right now. Navigating to a page is a permission to run what's on that page. That actually means that every customer who's coming to our web page shows a significant trust into our web page. And that is something we have to constantly earn. We have constantly news in the hacks, right? Just around about 2 weeks ago, not sure who heard that, but WhatsApp had a cross-site scripting publicly disclosed. I didn't look too much into it, but it was something, if you use WhatsApp in the browser, there was a cross-site scripting possibility in there. So this is not something which does not happen nowadays anymore. It's constantly still occurring. Why is it so important? Well, coming back to 90% of incidents contain, at least at one point in time, a vulnerability in the design or code of an application. And this is something we have seen kind of this morning already in the keynote. What happens if somebody finds such a vulnerability? Well, first there is research, these 72 hours before they actually got into Equifax. But then we have the infiltration we are in. We have 4 months of discovery. I think, if I remember that correctly, it was around about 4 months of discovery until I really find the data I'm looking for. And then we capture all that data and we start exfiltrating it. That's the last process. If we are capable to disrupt any of these steps in there, we likely prevent another big exploit, another big security breach, right? It's only one part which we need to cut in that line, and then the security breach would not happen. The issue is we don't know which will be the combined execution. That means we need to fix as many of the weaknesses in there as we can. Even so, we do not know, right? And that is, if I look at application, and somebody's going to tell me very often if I find something, is this really something somebody could exploit, somebody could get to? Just because we can't think of a way to attack something doesn't mean that there is not somebody out there much more intelligent than we are who finds a way to use exactly this weakness, to use exactly that vulnerability in order to exploit that. So what do we do all about this, right? If we look at, me included, right? As I told you, I was a developer before. If we look at what developers think of security, they traditionally resisted or, and this is the example from this morning, right? We're just not given the time to run proper security. Why? Well, we have, oops, that was the wrong button. Sorry, I got a new clicker, and that's always dangerous, having a new clicker. Security gets involved far too late, right? Who experienced, and sorry, nothing against penetration testers, really nothing, but who experienced the situation that you developed an application for quite a while, and then a penetration tester came in, it took him 2 weeks, 3 weeks to look at the application, and that time you could not go live, and then he found a list of issues and said, well, all this has to be fixed before we go live, right? We are far too late at this point in time, and don't get me wrong, penetration testing is super, super important. But if we make this as the only release gate, it's just stopping a release. And if we talk about DevOps, this is something which we definitely can't do, right? We can't wait for 2 or 3 weeks for a release, especially if we are talking about 48 releases a day, right? So that is a huge issue, especially if we see here development teams are growing at an 80-to-1 to 1,000-to-1 ratio to security teams, right? I have personally seen banks where we have 1 AppSec guy per 1,000 developers. So you can imagine the necessity is automation in that point in time, right? Full scans take too much time. When scans are initiated, developers don't get results in days or some cases in weeks, right? So the traditional approach, again, having a penetration testing, having a full-blown source code review at the end of any development cycle is just taking far too long in order to allow the developers to work at a pace where they want to work on, and allow the business to release at a pace which is necessary for the business. Audit process, well, understanding hundreds and hundreds and thousands of issues in an application takes time, right? It really, really takes time for the developers as well in order to just understand all these issues and fix them. So what can we do about that, really? The first part is we have to embed security into the development. Scan with every build. Scan with each release, automatically, automated during the building of the application, have the possibilities to find vulnerabilities. Why? Well, remember the slide I had pretty much in the beginning, right? We are making more and more applications, which we release more and more often. What does that mean? Well, if I release an application 48 times a day, it's very, very unlikely that these are the 10 million lines of code huge applications, right? We're talking about microservices here. Microservices can be scanned fast. These are small applications which are easily being to scan. And if I scan them continuously and find all issues continuously, well, just imagine how many issues you think could be implemented within 30 minutes or 1 hour, right? It's not like we detect hundreds of new issues, right? It's 1, 2, very often no issue at all, right? But we can release with an assurance that there is no new vulnerability being introduced. And we can provide the feedback directly to the developer into his IDE. Security testing. We still need the full-blown security testing, right? But the question this morning, actually, I was thinking about, Philip was going into a different direction with that one, but how often do you deploy on a Sunday? How often do you deploy, I don't know, during month ends, during any specific holidays? Much less, right? Take that time for the full-blown, longer-running security tests, right? The time is there. Just put it properly and plan it properly in. Run the full-blown security test. Take the penetration testers in there, right? Because they find things which are absolutely impossible to find, to be found by any automated solution. What I always say, with the static analysis, I'm perfectly capable to find a badly implemented login page. If there is no login page, the static analysis will very likely and the dynamic analysis will very likely not send any alert. Because there is no logic testing in there, right? That's where the penetration tester is coming into the game. And then runtime protection, right? Let's protect the applications while they're out there. Because there will be constantly new threats. Okay, that was the end of the microphone. So it works again? Okay, good. There will be new threats coming up, right? There will be new vulnerabilities be found. The application which I released a year ago will likely suffer from issues which I wasn't even aware of that they exist a year ago. So I have to be able to test and protect applications while they're running, and I have to continuously monitor these applications in order to make sure to retest. The times are over where we can say, we build that application, we're going to deploy it, and it will run for the next 10 years. No, unfortunately not anymore. Those times are definitely over. We have to continue. And that is less an issue for the developers, actually. That is more an issue for all the managers in here, right? We have to learn that we continuously have to look at all those applications. Here are just some technologies which can be used for that. SaaS, DAST, mobile application security testing, continuous application security, continuous monitoring, application monitoring. All these things can be used for that. And all this, if we do all this, we can actually go a step further and talk about software security assurance. Well, let me give you a little anecdote on these two. Who heard about these two? BSIM and OpenSIM. Okay, at least a few. I'm happy. Roughly 10 years ago, I would say, yeah, roughly 10 years ago, there were a few people. It was Gary McGraw, CTO of Cigital right now being part of Synopsys. It was Brian Chess, one of the founders of Fortify. and it was Praveer Chandra, at that point in time an independent consultant, being later hired by Fortify in order to work on that. And they were sitting at an OWASP conference, probably having too much beer in the evening, and discussing how to implement proper application security in a company. What is necessary for that? And they decided, okay, let's do two things. Let's, on the one side, build a maturity model which theoretically shows us what do we need to do in order to build secure applications. And on the other side, they said, well, let's go out and ask companies, what are you doing in order to build secure applications? So this was started by Gary McGraw and Brian Chess. This was then done by Praveer Chandra. This ended up, this initiative, in the OpenSAM, which is under the OWASP umbrella right now, and just has been released version 2. So I'm giving you a little bit of history here. This one is still continued. There is constant debate on who is actually responsible for all that, but that's political issues. It's still a pretty good model. If you look at the OpenSAM in the beginning, 4 areas, 4 functions: governance, constructions, verifications, and deployment. And you have all these different areas in here where you need to work on in order to ensure that applications are secure. And this is starting from some education and guidance, right? We need to have trained developers. Up to, it's going to environment hardening. We heard about that, right? Patching an application can be quite important. And operational enablement, vulnerability management here. What am I going to do if somebody is calling my help desk and telling me, well, guys, I found a cross-site scripting in your application, right? How are processes built up that this information actually ends up in the right place? All these things are part of application security. Just released a few weeks ago, OpenSAM version 2.0. You see it's not getting easier, it's just getting more complex, which is not a real surprise, right? And yeah, you see all these parts here. The beauty about having BSIM and OpenSAM is we have comparable models, where on the one side we see what we should do theoretically, and on the other side we see what we actually, what companies are actually doing. Because let's be very clear, no company should aim to get to maturity level 3 in all different areas. It's really depending on how you deploy software, how you build software, what are you going to do with this software to make a very clear and conscious decision how secure you want to be. This is how this is all fitting into a life cycle of an application, and this is where Fortify can actually help you in all that. And these are you will get the slides later on for this one. Let's absolutely go to that, but there are some key principles to all that. Rapid identification and remediation of critical vulnerabilities, right? If people start with that, there are 2 directions you can see. The one direction is, okay, let's take our most critical application and make it 100% secure. Develop for 10 years, right? And you want to make it 100% secure right now, this will probably take you a few years in order to make it 100% secure. That's the group 1. Definitely not an ideal approach, because you have all your little bit less critical application, but still very important, which are not secured. And on the other side, you have those companies where, well, let's understand how our security posture is, right? Let's scan all our applications which we have, and then they're done with scanning and all the applications for probably a year's time. Nothing has been fixed, so they are no bit more secure than they have been 1 year before. So what you need to find is a right balance, right? Understand how to work with application security, how to fix your applications, and start fixing, and don't try to fix everything immediately. Prevent introduction of new vulnerabilities, right? While you're developing applications, you can definitely make sure that you do not introduce new vulnerabilities into that you do not make the situation even worse. Provide support for developers. And I couldn't say that often enough. and I couldn't make that actually bold enough. And I have a slide later on, which due to the timing, and I already see him picking out the 5 minutes slide here, I need to skip. You need management support in order to start that, right? Developers need to be given the time, and they need to be given the resources in order to do that. If you start in your company with application security, make sure that you have higher management attention to that one. And this is exactly what Philip said this morning, right? If you don't have that, you're at a dead end immediately. Monitor and control. Well, I've been a developer long enough. I join a new development group. These are the development guidelines, right? You have 1 day to set up your computer, start the next day. What happens with this one? Well, you open your desk, put it in there, and at the end of the project, you take everything out and put it in the bin. Nobody's reading that, right? So in that perspective, we have to accept that we have to monitor, right? If we don't control our own guidelines, then we can't imagine that anybody's following these guidelines. Continuous improvement, 2 minutes. Oh, wow. I thought a 5 minute slide. Okay, I really have to speed up. Continuous improvement that obviously we can get more strict. The rollout, let me quickly go through that. These are 5 slides. Do an assessment where you are and where you want to go. Have a team which is following up on all that, right? Very important. Then pilot on with 1, 2, 3 projects, depending on the size of your company. Once you have done that, assess again, and then you can start the rollout to all companies. Pretty basic project management on the one side. On the other side, why should we handle application security any different to that one? I told you, right? It's a bunch of slides. Okay, some final thoughts. The logical next step will be we see more applications deployed faster with higher automation, right? That is what we at the moment can very, very easily see. This train we are on at the moment with DevOps, with high automation, will not stop, very clearly. And we will have less dedicated resources. That is pretty clear as well. The other parts, when I think of the future, web applications, we are on a good way in terms of security, right? That's, we understood that we have a problem. That's a good part already, and we start addressing the problem. Mobile applications, well, at least we understand that we have a problem. I would not say that we really start addressing the problem yet, right? But the interest is clearly raising. Internet of Things. Internet of what? Right? It's just nothing. I just read this morning, or who's looking at the Heise newsletter, how easy it is to hack satellites. I was shocked, actually. Really, really scary. How many IP addresses do you use at home? Just as a thought, right? I don't have a connected fridge. I don't have a connected coffee machine or anything like that. Still, I made the count, and I have probably something between 40 and 50 IP addresses just at home. It's insane, right? It's really, really a lot. Yeah, not even talking about the latest threat, satellites, right? Which is part of Internet of Things as well. There is no such thing as toy software. It's all stuff that people are going to bet their lives on. The system that you're building today, and this is for all the developers, the systems that you're building today, even if they seem like they're experimental, if they succeed, they're going to become critical stuff that people are going to rely on tomorrow. That was said 2008 by Marcus Raynham, one of the co-inventors of the firewall. And that's still absolutely true, right? It only took us 400,000 lines of code to orbit Earth in Space Shuttle. In 2019, Microsoft Windows had 39 million lines of code. Typical new car now has over 100 million lines of code. Just totally ridiculous. This problem will not go away, right? We cannot just ignore it and say, in 5 years it's gone. No way. It's getting bigger and bigger. There's never enough time to do security testing, but there is always enough time to do an emergency patch. We must learn implementing security from the beginning so we can spend less time on patching. And this is something I hope in 10 years somebody will take this quote and say, well, Lukas said this, right? And he was wrong. We do proper patch. We do proper security right now. That's just my hope. And with that, Oh no, that's this one. This one I wanted to have, but I can talk about that one at the very end. Questions?
Thank you, Lukas, for this talk. Questions from the audience. There are lots of questions. We're going to go through the most upvoted ones.
Okay.
What are good methods, practices, or tools to ensure runtime protection for software already released or in production?
Okay. There are two different parts of it. The one part is very clearly a WAF, a web application firewall. The issue about a WAF is clearly that you need a lot of training for the WAF. So if you talk about 48 releases a day, on the other side, if you hear about a proper training cycle for an application with a WAF, which is something like between 2 to 3 weeks, you see the mismatch, right? That doesn't work. The other technologies around there are so-called RASP technologies, runtime application self-protection. Let's be very honest, right? They work really, really great. They are sitting inside the application. They are immediately context aware. They can be switched on immediately. The downside for all of them, and we have one as well, right? App Defender. We have one. The downside is they only work for certain technology stacks. It's not like a WAF which you can just block every HTTP traffic. No, they're working for certain technology stacks. All of them do Java and .NET. Some have JavaScript in there and some variants of Java. But yeah, you will not find the one RASP vendor who's going to sell for everything. Okay.
A second question, is it useful to keep the security people as separate teams so that they are less biased? Developers could try to hide their bugs to not get blamed.
Okay, if I understood the question correctly, it's about separating security teams from the developers. My personal opinion is very clearly no. You need a security champion in every development group. And interestingly, we were preaching that as 45 already before anybody was talking about DevOps. Right? This is essentially DevOps, right? Bring the people together. The new hype is DevSecOps or sec4dev or personally a word I hate. Nobody's talking about DevQAOps, right? QA is just an integral part of DevOps, as security has to be an integral part of DevOps, right? And by saying DevSecOps, we suddenly make security optional, right? No, security can't be optional in DevOps. If you go back to the last quote I had there, and we want to develop secure applications, security has to be part of the development group. Yes, there needs to be a separate team in order to support these champions, but we need a champion in every development group.
Okay. One last question. Shouldn't browsers protect us against such injection attacks? I heard something about the same origin policy.
Yeah, and we are getting better and better, right? And we had this nice, in the second talk, we had this nice little picture about this old city of being attacked by fire. And then we build up the city and make it more secure, and now we have cannons on the other side, right? That's the thing, right? Sure, browsers will protect us, but at the end of the day, a browser will never stop a user from clicking on this link. And as Howard Schmidt was cyber Caesar of the Obama administrations at one point in time said, I will never be able to tell my 80-year-old mother that an email with the subject, I love you. Who remembers I love you? Right? That an email with the subject, I love you, is in fact from somebody who doesn't love her at all. Right? We have to make sure, we as developers, we as security people, we as IT professionals, we have to make sure that the applications are secure. If this is via browsers, or if this is via secure applications, there will not be one silver bullet. Let's be very clear as well, right? We have to address the whole stack.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't take this personally that you said penetration testing is just one part of it. I totally agree. Thank you, Lukas, for this awesome talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just, if I have one last minute, these two books were given to me when I started in 2008 at 45, or I was told to read. This one I read immediately. Pretty interesting, a novel. This guy, Clifford Stoll, was admin at Berkeley and found out one of the first hacks, somebody from the University of Hanover, going via the, I think, University of Bremen and Berkeley into ARPANET and MILNET at that point. It was 1996 or something. Unbelievable. He caught him down because he had 50 cents of different processing time he had to bill, because that was his job. And there were a 50-cent gap of what he could give to somebody and what actually was the usage of CPU power. Just imagine when he showed up at the FBI and said, well, there's something weird going on. What's the damage? 50 cents, right? Pretty interesting story, real story. This one was given to me at the same point in time, and I ignored it. And I agree, it's a hard read. I read it finally. And it was eye-opening to me. This has nothing to do with IT, not at all. It's about building bridges, building houses, building whatever engineers do, right? Physical engineers. And what they do if something is going wrong. And this is something where we can all learn of, right? In the IT, and I mean the IT as a whole industry, we don't do these things, right? There is, just imagine what happens to the 737 MAX right now. 2 airplanes going down. Boeing, if that comes to worse, Boeing is going bankrupt on that, right? Nobody cares because we need to figure it out. We lose, how many? 150 million records at Equifax. We look around, oops, sorry, let's go on. That can't be the way. We need to change our behavior in that. Thank you.